movies and theme parks, he strived to bring out that hope and inner child that every person needs. And in the process, he built one of the most successful and powerful companies in the world, worth an estimated $130 billion. But before he was anywhere close to achieving success, he was homeless and only had $40 in his pocket. Before we get into the next part of the story, our team would like to quickly thank our sponsor, Keeps. Did you know that 2 out of 3 men will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35? The best way to prevent hair loss is to do something about it while you still have hair left. With Keeps, a licensed doctor will review your information online and recommend the right hair loss treatment plan for you. Then, your treatment is shipped directly to your door every 3 months. Keeps offers generic versions of the FDA-approved medications for hair loss, which makes it more affordable. Plus, you can message your Keeps doctor 24/7 with any questions or concerns you may have along the way and track your progress with their online tool. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/hook or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/hook. In 1901, Walt Disney was born in Chicago and raised on a farm in Marseille. His mother Flora was a teacher, and his father Elias was a farmer and businessman. Elias started many ventures but failed at each of them, forcing him to become a carpenter. When the Disney family grew to 7, the pressure to make ends meet took a toll on Elias. He and Flora had 4 sons, Herb, Ray, Roy, and Walt, and 1 daughter, Ruth. Elias became cold and even violent toward his children. It became so unbearable that Herb and Ray secretly ran away. The loss of 2 sons marked the start of a string of bad luck for the Disney family. Elias caught typhoid and then pneumonia. As he recovered, Roy took on the burden of taking care of the farm, but the work was too difficult for him, let alone any 16-year-old. So Flora urged Elias to sell the farm. He resisted but eventually caved and moved the family to Kansas City. Soon after, Walt's sister Ruth became bedridden with the measles. To keep her entertained, Walt drew a series of figures that appeared to move when the papers were flipped. It was his first attempt at animation and one of the rare moments where he could play. Unlike most 9-year-olds who spent time outdoors running and laughing, Walt had little time to play, his days passing by with drudgery. After moving to Kansas City, Elias bought a newspaper business and forced Walt to make deliveries before dawn. He refused to pay Walt for all his work, so Walt took up odd jobs, selling newspapers, delivering drugstore prescriptions, and sweeping floors. It wasn't long until Walt's teachers became concerned. They complained that he often fell asleep in class, and when he was awake, he had trouble paying attention. It didn't help that he was more interested in things outside his lessons. Walt was engrossed with drawing cartoons and reading stories about success and adventures. He also became enthralled by entertainment, which he discovered through his classmate Walt Pfeiffer. When Pfeiffer caught the mumps, Walt visited him at home since he was immune from having it in the past. The Pfeiffer family welcomed Walt and introduced him to the world of entertainment through motion pictures and vaudeville shows, which featured musical and magic acts, acrobatic and comedy routines. Afterward, Walt and Pfeiffer started going to the theaters. Walt kept it a secret from his father, who considered entertainment a waste of time. But eventually, he didn't need to. Like their older brothers Herb and Ray, Walt's 3rd brother Roy found their father's cold and violent tendencies unbearable and secretly ran away. The loss of 3 brothers forced Walt to take on more responsibilities. While he was just 10 years old, Walt had to work more and help to renovate the family home. Whenever Elias grew impatient with Walt, he struck him with whatever was in his hand. Once it was the handle of a hammer, and another time it was a wooden board. "How do you expect Walt to know those things? He's only a boy," Flora pleaded to no avail. From then on, Walt found himself caught in the family's string of bad luck. One cold evening, he was delivering newspapers for his father's business. As he crossed the street, he kicked a piece of ice and felt a sharp pain. A horseshoe nail pierced through his boot and jammed into his toe. "Help! I'm stuck!" Walt yelled. Not a single person on the street stopped to help him as he laid on the ground. It wasn't until much later that a driver parked his wagon to bring him to a doctor. "Kid, I've got nothing to give you for the pain. You'll just have to hang on," the doctor warned before removing the nail with pliers. It took 2 whole weeks for Walt to recover from his injury. Being free from work on bed rest for so long encouraged the 14-year-old to think about his future. He doubted that he could obtain a prestigious job like a doctor or lawyer or even attend college. No one in his family had ever been able to afford the luxury. Walt decided to think about what he was most passionate about. It was clear that it was drawing. It had always been his solace during difficult times. He enjoyed how his cartoons brought joy and laughter to those around him. At that moment, Walt decided to become a cartoonist. Unbeknownst to him, pursuing his passion would lead to building one of the biggest companies in the world. After 7 years in Kansas City, the Disney family moved back to Chicago. Elias's newspaper business had failed to grow, so he used all his savings and some of Walt's money to invest in a jelly factory. Walt was pressured into working there as a handyman and night guard to contribute to the family income. If he didn't, Elias wouldn't allow him to take art classes outside of school. Walt was paid very little at the factory, so after a while he decided to quit to earn more money as a gatesman, mail sorter, and delivery boy. When the First World War entered its 4th year, Walt quit all of his jobs since he was eager to join the effort. He also couldn't bear the idea of returning to high school, so he lied about his age to work for the Red Cross as an ambulance driver. At the time, he was just 16 years old. During Walt's first assignment, an influenza epidemic erupted and was killing millions of people worldwide. Walt caught the virus and was ordered to head to a hospital. As he hopped into an ambulance, the driver advised him to return home instead. "You'll never come out of the hospital alive," he warned. Walt heeded his warning. Walt's mother nursed both him and his sister through days of high fevers and delirium, and while she also ended up catching the virus, she continued caring for both of them until they fully recovered. Later, Walt discovered that 2 of his close friends were taken to the hospital after getting infected. The next day, both of them had passed away. Despite the realization that he had escaped from the same fate, Walt continued working for the Red Cross and was sent to France. When the war ended, Walt returned home and refused to return to high school. Elias accepted his decision and offered him a job at the factory for a fair salary. "Dad, I don't want that kind of job," Walt insisted. "Then what do you want to do, Walter?" Elias asked. "I want to be an artist." "How do you expect to make a living as an artist?" "I don't know," Walt admitted. After Walt's experience in France, one thing was certain: he needed to forge his own path. Against his father's wishes, Walt packed all his belongings and boarded a train for Kansas City. His brother Roy and some of his childhood friends were there, and Walt was certain that he could become a cartoonist for the Kansas City Star. Once Walt got settled, he headed to the Kansas City Star's office. An HR employee curtly informed him that there were no openings for a cartoonist. Walt decided to come up with a new plan to get his foot in the door. He noticed that there was an opening for a copy boy and asked if he could apply. The HR employee insisted Walt find a job in transportation instead, since he previously worked as an ambulance driver. Afterward, Walt decided to try his luck at the Kansas City Journal. Once again, he was told there were no openings for a cartoonist. When Walt confided in Roy about his struggles, Roy urged him to do something more practical. Walt refused to give up. Later, Roy complained to his colleague about Walt's stubbornness. His colleague suggested that Walt apply to an art studio that was looking for an apprentice. Roy immediately told Walt, who rushed over to the studio to apply. The owners were impressed with his eagerness and offered him the job. At the studio, Walt met a man named Oop Iwerks. Like Walt, Oop was a high school dropout and hopped from one odd job to another. The 2 artists became friends and discovered their skills complemented each other. Walt was a visionary and Oop was fast and flexible. When both of them were laid off after the holidays, they remained optimistic and decided to start a business together. It was called Disney Iwerks. Disney iWorks only lasted for 1 month. The Kansas City Film Ad Company was looking for an artist and offered Walt the position. Walt preferred to devote all of his time to his new business with Oob, but Oob insisted that he accept this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Oob was certain that he could manage the business alone during Walt's absence, but he wasn't outgoing enough to bring in sales, so the business fell apart. Afterward, Walt persuaded his boss to hire Oob. The failure of Disney iWorks turned out to be a blessing in disguise. At work, Walt was introduced to animation using cutout human and animal figures. He was curious about how it worked and befriended a cameraman to learn. Soon after, he could operate the camera. Was introduced to animation using cutout human and animal figures. He was curious about how it worked and befriended a cameraman to learn. Soon after, he could operate the camera on his own. Later, Walt realized animation looked more realistic when using hand-drawn figures instead of cutouts. He also noticed that the top studios in New York were making movie cartoons like the Coco the Clown series this way. He headed to a library to pick up a few books and photocopy each page to guide him as he practiced. The Kansas City Film Ad Company was so impressed with Walt's new skill that they asked him to produce animations using hand-drawn cartoons for their clients. Walt was thrilled but eager to experiment beyond the material given to him by the company's copywriters, so he borrowed the company's camera, created a makeshift studio in his garage, and started making his own cartoons. After completing 300 feet of film, Walt felt confident enough to show his cartoons to the manager of the Newman Theater Company. The manager was impressed and agreed to feature Walt's cartoons. They became so popular that Walt quit his job and started a new business called Laugh-O-Gram Films. To differentiate Laugh-O-Gram from other studios, Walt decided to focus on something new. A series of animated cartoons based on traditional fairy tales. He pitched the ideas to investors and raised enough money to rent out an office and poach Oob and 5 other animators. Soon after, he signed a deal with pictorial clubs to produce 6 fairy tale cartoons. While Walt and his team were able to complete all 6 cartoons that same year after sending them to pictorial clubs, no money came in. Pictorial clubs went bankrupt. After discovering that pictorial clubs was no more, Laugh-O-Gram followed suit. Walt became homeless and even shoeless. The only pair of shoes he had left was at a cobbler, and he couldn't afford the small cost to pick them up. For the first time in his life, Walt doubted his career as a cartoonist. Maybe his father and Roy were right. Being a cartoonist wasn't going to pay the bills or keep food on the table. Walt decided it was time to give up on being a cartoonist and sold his camera. Afterward, he headed to Hollywood with just $40 in his pocket. His plan was to stay with his Uncle Robert and get into the movie business as a director. Walt's luck was no different in Hollywood. Every single studio that he applied to as a director rejected him, and when Walt begged the studios for any kind of job, they told him that there were no openings. Eventually, Walt ran out of money and had to borrow from Roy. Roy suggested that he start making cartoons again. "No, I'm too late," Walt insisted. "I don't see how I can top those New York boys now." At the time, there was no cartoonists in Hollywood, and the top studios that made movie cartoons remained in New York. Walt doubted that he could compete with them from Hollywood. Walt continued to apply for studio jobs and even tried his hand at acting. After a gig fell through, Walt's uncle Robert nagged him about being unemployed and having no prospects. Walt concluded that the only way he could get his foot in the door in the movie business was by making fairy tale cartoons again. Afterward, Walt created a makeshift studio in his Uncle Robert's garage and then pitched ideas to film distributors. One of his ideas was to produce a series of Alice's Wonderland comedies for a New York distributor named Margaret Winkler. Fortunately, Margaret agreed to work with Walt. Afterward, Walt convinced Roy and Oob to leave their jobs and start a new business with him. Alice's Wonderland was a hit and grew into a longer series. By the time the excitement wore off, a new opportunity had come in. Universal Pictures asked Margaret's husband, Charles Mintz, to find someone to create a series starring a rabbit. Margaret encouraged Charles to give Walt the job. Walt accepted and quickly started production. The final product was called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Its first short film, Trolley Troubles, was an instant success and caught the attention of the top animators in New York. Walt was certain that Charles would renew his contract to grow the Oswald series and headed to his office to discuss the terms. Before leaving, Oob warned Walt that Margaret's brother was spending an unusual amount of time in their studio with their employees. Walt brushed off his suspicions. Considering Oswald's popularity, Walt asked for a slight pay increase for each new episode. Charles suggested a different offer. It was significantly less than what he was paying Walt before and wouldn't even cover production costs. Walt was puzzled and asked for an explanation. "Either you come with me at my price, or I'll take your team away from you," Charles insisted. "I have your employees signed up." While Walt froze in disbelief, Charles pressed him for an answer. Walt turned him down and vowed to own every character he created. Universal Pictures had only commissioned Walt to create Oswald, and the company owned the rights. "Protect yourself, Charlie," Walt advised. "If my artists did it to me, they'll do it to you too." Before heading home, Walt sent a letter to Roy. "Keep your chin up. We will be able to laugh last. That's the best laugh of all." When Walt returned to his studio, he wasted no time in creating a new character. He started sketching different animals and landed on the idea of a mouse. Oob took over and started drawing a caricature of a mouse instead of a real one, since animation required efficiency. The fewer lines, the better. The final product was a mouse with a round belly and skinny arms wearing 2-button shorts, the style worn by young men at the time. In spite of Walt's success with Oswald, he had trouble finding a distributor for his first animated short film, Steamboat Willie, featuring Mickey Mouse. A show business veteran named Harry Reichenbach explained to Walt why distributors were turning him down. "Those guys don't know what's good until the public tells them." Harry suggested that Walt play Steamboat Willie in a Broadway theater. Walt was scared that it would make it harder to release to a distributor, but Harry convinced him it would do the opposite. Several months later, Steamboat Willie was released at the Colony Theater. It made history as the first animated cartoon with sound and received rave reviews from the New York Times and Variety. And just like Harry predicted, several distributors made offers to release the film, but every single one of them were insisting on owning the rights to Mickey Mouse. Walt shared his frustrations with Pat Powers, one of the founders of Universal Pictures and the owner of the sound system used for Steamboat Willie. Pat sympathized with Walt and offered to release his film under his company, as long as he continued to use his sound system. Walt quickly agreed to Pat's offer. It was much fairer than what other distributors were offering, and Pat was willing to advance the money Walt needed to make more cartoons. But like most stories made in Hollywood, it was too good to be true. After Walt signed a deal with Pat, Mickey Mouse became a national sensation in the US. Mickey's a nice fellow who never does any harm, who gets in scrapes through no fault of his own but always manages to come up grinning, Walt explained when asked about Mickey's popularity. Walt was certain that he'd received plenty of checks from Pat, but not a single one came in. Pat decided to keep all of the profit he made off Mickey Mouse and owed Walt hundreds of thousands of dollars. Still, Walt decided not to pursue legal action because of Pat's influence in Hollywood and end his contract instead. Pat was bitter that he lost Walt's business and threatened to take down any company that signed a deal with him. MGM gave in to Pat's threats and ended talks of a potential deal. Meanwhile, Columbia Pictures was not as timid and set up a legal fund to combat his threats. With Columbia Pictures backing, Walt pushed himself and his animators to produce higher quality animations, even if it meant slipping further into debt. Eventually, the stress took a toll on Walt and led to a nervous breakdown. After seeing a doctor, Walt decided to take a vacation with his wife Lily and headed to France. When Walt returned to his studio, he discovered it was becoming more difficult to meet payroll, so he decided to ask Columbia Pictures for an advance for each cartoon produced, but their answer was no. Walt shared his frustrations with Saul Lesser, a veteran producer, who mentioned them to his friend, Joseph Schenck, the president of United Artists. Joseph sympathized with Walt and reached out to him to become his new distributor. Walt was thrilled since United Artists was co-founded by his biggest idol, Charlie Chaplin. It encouraged Walt to finally take his animations to the next level by adding color. Roy pleaded with him to reconsider. "We'd be crazy to take on the expense of color," Roy argued. "But the pictures will create so much excitement that we'll get longer playdates and bigger rentals," Walt insisted. "That'll bring the money back eventually." Roy and Walt's employees remained unconvinced. Still, Walt forged ahead with a new undertaking. His first feature film with color and sound. The chosen fairy tale was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. As Walt began production, he discovered that Snow White was being called Disney's folly behind his back. Many predicted that this crazy venture would fail like the others and even lead to bankruptcy. Walt became concerned and sought advice from Hal Horn, a publicist at United Artists. "What should I do about all this bad talk about the feature?" Walt asked. "Nothing," Hal advised. "Keep them wondering. Let them call it Disney's folly or any other damn thing, as long as they keep talking about it. That picture is gonna pay off, and the more suspense you build up, the more it'll pay off." Walt heeded his advice and remained focused on making Snow White a success. 3 years later, Snow White was finally released. It made history as the first animated feature film in the world with a running time of 83 minutes. It was a critical and commercial success and became the highest-grossing film of its time, bringing in more than $8 million during its first year, the equivalent of over $100 million today. Finally, Walt was able to pay off his debts. From then on, he decided to focus on producing feature films instead of shorts. Walt's newfound success allowed him to buy a new studio and a new home for his once skeptical parents. But it seemed that after every new milestone, bad luck followed. Flora passed away from asphyxiation due to a furnace leak in the new home that Walt purchased, and the Second World War led to dozens of business deals falling through. Walt blamed himself for his mother's passing and struggled to save the company. His new feature films Pinocchio and Fantasia resulted in financial losses from going over budget, driving the company on the brink of bankruptcy. Walt had no choice but to scale down his feature films and take the company public. While the IPO was a success and brought in millions of dollars, it inadvertently fueled a studio strike. After the financial losses of Pinocchio and Fantasia, Walt had to lay off staff, cut wages, and deny bonuses. Many of his employees remained bitter and went on strike for 5 weeks. In spite of all Walt's troubles, he forged ahead with planning more feature films and his biggest undertaking yet, a new Hollywood attraction. "You know, it's a shame people come to Hollywood and find there's nothing to see," Walt mentioned to a friend. "They expect to see glamour and movie stars and they go away disappointed. Wouldn't it be nice if people come to Hollywood and see something?" Walt's mind was set on building an amusement park. The idea came after several trips to Griffith Park merry-go-round with his daughters, Diane and Sharon. Each time his daughters rode the carousel, he saw the same pattern. The parents were bored, the operators were cheerless and unfriendly, and the grounds were dirty and littered. Roy opposed his idea, reminding him that the company was in debt. If he wanted to continue with his plans, he would have to finance it alone. Walt remained determined and borrowed on his life insurance. Over the next few years, Walt visited all kinds of attractions in America and Europe for inspiration. He finally found what he was looking for at the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, a park that featured family-friendly rides, nice restaurants, beautiful gardens, and fireworks. "Now, this is what an amusement park should be," Walt enthused his wife Lily. By the time Walt settled on the name Disneyland, his plans had grown beyond his initial inspiration and money was running out. So Walt decided to launch a weekly TV show to finance the park's construction. Roy finally supported the idea, but Walt needed the board's approval. When Walt pitched the idea, the board complained that the company wasn't in the amusement park business. Walt argued that it was in the entertainment business, and so were amusement parks. Still, the board couldn't envision Disneyland the way that Walt did. "There's nothing like it in the entire world," Walt insisted. "I know, because I've looked. That's why it can be great, because it will be unique, a new concept in entertainment, and I know it can be a success." By the end of Walt's plea, tears filled his eyes. The board was not only moved by his display of passion, but finally convinced, gave Walt their approval. After being given the green light, Walt signed a deal with ABC. They agreed to invest in his amusement park and guaranteed loans in exchange for a TV series with hour-long episodes called Disneyland. showcasing feature and short films and documentaries. Walt was thrilled but held back on celebrating. He received backlash for his new plan since TV was a new medium, and theater owners feared that it would affect their business. They even threatened to boycott the product of any collaborating studio. Walt insisted TV would encourage a broader audience to watch movies in theaters and forged ahead with his plans. 2 years later, Disneyland finally opened in Anaheim, California. The media called its first day a failure. Thousands of scammers created counterfeit tickets, rides broke down, restaurants ran out of food, and a gas leak was detected in one area. But like always, Walt remained undeterred and turned things around by making operational changes and inviting the press to return. Within 1 year, over 3 million people visited Disneyland, and the ABC series became the highest-rated TV show. Finally, after 3 whole decades in Hollywood, Walt achieved financial stability. In an interview, Walt shared his thoughts on the secret to success. This special secret, it seems to me, can be summarized in 4 C's. They are curiosity, confidence, courage, and constancy. And the greatest of these is confidence. When you believe a thing, believe it all the way, implicitly and unquestionably. Today, Disneyland is called the happiest place on earth, and Walt Disney is one of the most successful and powerful companies in the world, worth an estimated $130 billion. This is the story of how a high school dropout who was once homeless became an American icon by pursuing his passion. For more inspiring stories and advice from today's most successful leaders, don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
With this in mind, we should act immediately to start finding ways off of this beach.
Nerds! My new money goal? Refinance, free up cash, turn my spare room into a recording studio.
Discover and compare the smartest credit cards, lenders, and more, so you can make your money goals happen on NerdWallet.
For starters, you'll notice that there's
On a road trip, do you need power or optimum power? If that battery in your kid's toy dies, you are in for a long ride. So upgrade to Optimum. Duracell Optimum.
yielding up to 75 seeds per year, and this tiny fact is going to save our lives. If you can somehow get one onto this beach, you'll have a fully grown tree with 75 coconuts in as little as 3.5 hours. And since these things float, we can use them to build ourselves a raft to sail off this beach. The hardest part will be getting access to a coconut tree in the first place, because obviously the only reason these trees are growing is because they aren't inside of the time field. While most of the walls are too tall to climb, there are several spots on this beach where you can see foliage that's completely within our reach. If any of these have coconut trees nearby, we can try knocking down one of its fruits and plant them on beach soil. A coconut seed can survive up to 120 days before germination, and the water inside provides enough moisture to grow in sandy conditions. So even though time passes quickly, we would still have a full 10 minutes to plant it. If we hack time by growing our own forest of coconuts, it wouldn't take us very long to build a raft. And even if we pass out from the decompression sickness, we can still make it through the time field without drowning. Now, that's not the only thing we have at our disposal. Every dead body on this beach must be considered an extremely valuable resource, because we can use a corpse to test how quickly time is moving, depending on where we are on the beach. Luckily, this grandma died just moments ago, and that's great news for anyone who wants to escape this place. Since we can't cross the canyon without passing out, we have good reason to believe the symptoms are a sign that we're already crossing the threshold, but we don't know exactly where the threshold is. This one's body can help us confirm where that border is, because if we push our corpse through the canyon until we get sick and pass out, we will be able to tell if it's reached the boundary by observing its rate of decomposition. For example, if the granny's head is still fresh skin, while the rest of her body is turning into bones, then we'll know that this is the exact boundary line, and we can concentrate all of our problem solving into crossing a smaller area of space. It might even be as simple as forcing people across one by one, and then barricading them in so they can't return after passing out. Their bodies might adjust after a longer period, and we can successfully cross the threshold by brute force. While the others try to find a way out, Trench and Kara here are hiding in a tent, and the girl is scared by how much they're changing. The boy comforts her, explaining they're just growing up and they should embrace it, but he's about to make his biggest mistake. Outside, the parents notice the youngest kids are missing, and this guy spots them across the beach. As the group walks towards them, they're all suddenly horrified to find the children are now fully grown, and the girl is already 5 months pregnant. Jared here tells them that a full-term pregnancy only takes 20 minutes on this beach, and she'll be going to labor very soon. Terrified, Kara's laid down on a towel as her belly begins to stretch. Desperate to get her daughter help, the mother runs away to try and escape the beach, but she doesn't make it far. Moments later, Maddox here finds the woman passed out in the sand, and as she's helping her get back on her feet, they hear the baby crying in the distance. The two girls walk over to see the infant for themselves, but then it suddenly goes quiet. Horrified, this woman cradles the baby, and the others realize it died from a lack of attention, with no way for them to save its life. It's absolutely devastating, and Trent here screams at the others, unable to accept his child's death. Later, Maddox tries to comfort this woman about what just happened, but she's traumatized by today's events and tells the girl to leave her alone. Suddenly, they hear screaming in the distance. This guest watches in horror as Charles brutally stabs the stranger to death, and everyone starts running over to stop her, but it's too late. By the time they get there, the man is already dead, and that's 2 down with 9 more to go. The dad slowly approaches Charles and takes the knife out of his hand, but the man barely reacts. He's suffering a mental breakdown, and the group walks away as the dad puts the murder weapon into his wife's back. Jared here tells the parents that his wife will die soon without her seizure medication, and worries that the doctor might kill again. He volunteers to swim out to find another way off the beach. Okay, first of all, Jared here is an idiot. Everything we know about this beach should tell us that swimming out into the ocean is the worst thing he could do. There's already been one dead body washed up on shore, and this guy told them the girl was an excellent swimmer, so there's no reason for him to think he could do any better. Secondly, we don't know how the time field is covering this place. It might be like a magnetic field just inside the canyon, or it could be a huge dome that stretches for several kilometers. If he gets decompression sickness while swimming and passes out, he's guaranteed to drown, and that's unhelpful to anyone. Time is the most important resource here, and when you realize that just crossing the beach alone could take you 1 full year of your life, you can't waste it on trying things that don't have a good chance of working. If every solution takes you 3 hours to attempt, you are limited to testing 8 ideas total in your entire lifespan. This is incredibly limited, but we have one advantage here. Because of this many people, we can explore multiple solutions if we work together in the right way. First, we should factor how old everyone on this beach is and how long they have left to live, because that is how much time we can actually spend to find a way out. This here is our official time budget, and the best way to spend it is to spread out, so multiple solutions are being explored at once. Anytime the whole group is doing the same thing, that moment is compounded and wasted 9 times over. For example, if the whole group has to spend 30 minutes walking across the entire beach together, that isn't just